I still remember the first message Carolyn sent me on Instagram. It was a simple, "Hey, I love your photography." But it felt different. Like she genuinely cared about the little pieces of my life I'd been sharing online. I wasn't even looking for anything serious at the time. But something about her drew me in. Her profile was full of travel pictures, big smiles, and candid moments that made her seem so full of light. She looked like the kind of person who could light up any room. We started talking, and it felt effortless. Within a few weeks, our conversations went from casual banter to hours-long calls where we'd talk about everything, our favorite childhood memories, embarrassing stories, and even our worst fears. She had this laugh that could make anyone smile. And she always seemed to find a way to turn the simplest moments into something exciting. Our first date wasn't anything fancy, but it was perfect. We met at a little coffee shop downtown. Carolyn showed up in this bright yellow dress that somehow matched her energy perfect. She was funny, smart, and incredibly kind. The kind of person who'd compliment the barista for no reason other than to make their day better. We talked for hours until they closed the place down. After that, things moved quickly. She introduced me to her friends, and I introduced her to mine. My best friend Mark joked that she was way out of my league, and honestly, I agreed. She was gorgeous, had this magnetic personality, and seemed to have her life together. But what really got to me was how she treated people. And she was the kind of person who'd tip extra if the waiter looked like they were having a bad day, or stop to help a stranger with their groceries. When we hit the 1-year mark, I started thinking she might be the one. I had grown up in a house filled with screaming matches and broken plates, so I was hyper aware of what to look out for in a partner. With Carolyn, though, everything felt different. She was patient, calm, and grounded. I watched how she treated waiters, dealt with stress, and handled her money. All those little details you're supposed to notice before committing to someone. She passed every test. By the time I proposed, I was sure. I thought I'd broken the toxic cycle I'd grown up with. Carolyn seemed like the antidote to all the chaos I'd known. We got married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. I remember looking at her that day and thinking, this is it. This is my happily ever after. It felt like I had finally won at life, but I guess I was just seeing what I wanted to see. The first year of our marriage was like living in a dream. We had a beautiful little house in the suburbs, a cozy spot with a yard big enough to host barbecues, and maybe someday have kids running around. Carolyn was still that vibrant, loving person I'd fallen for. She'd leave little notes in my lunchbox or plan spontaneous weekend trips. It felt like we were on the same page, building something solid together. But things started shifting little by little about a year in. At first, it was subtle, like small cracks forming in the foundation. She'd get annoyed over things that never seemed to bother her before. I remember one day I worked late trying to finish a project at the office. When I got home, instead of her usual warm smile, she was cold and distant. She accused me of prioritizing work over her. I brushed it off, thinking she was just having a bad day. Those bad days started to happen more often. We'd argue over the dumbest thing. Dishes left in the sink, what to watch on TV, even how I folded the laundry. It was like walking through a minefield where the smallest misstep would set off an explosion. And the worst part? I had no idea why. I tried to fix things. I'm the type of person who believes you don't just throw something away because it gets hard. Marriage is supposed to mean something, right? So I suggested we go to couples therapy. Carolyn agreed barely. Fine, if it's that important to you, she said, like I was asking her to do me a favor. The first session was a disaster. The therapist mentioned communication issues, suggesting that Carolyn's way of handling conflict might not be healthy. That was all it took. She completely lost it. accused the therapist of attacking her, and stormed out, calling the whole thing a waste of time. She never went back, and every time I brought it up after that, she shut me down. Around that time, I found out her father had passed away. She didn't tell me at first. I only found out when her mother mentioned it in passing during a phone call. Grief does strange things to people, so I tried to be patient. I gave her space, thinking she'd open up when she was ready. But instead of talking to me, she got angrier and more distant. The fights got louder and uglier. Once, the neighbors even called the cops because they thought someone was being attacked. It wasn't physical. Carolyn threw things or hit me, but her yelling could shake the walls. One night, she screamed at me for forgetting to pick up her dry cleaning. I just stood there, stunned, wondering how the woman who used to laugh with me over stupid inside jokes had turned into someone I barely recognized. Eventually, we stopped fighting as much, not because things got better, but because we stopped talking altogether. It felt like we were roommates more than anything else. We'd go through the motions, wake up, work, eat dinner in front of the TV, and go to bed. Repeat. I kept holding on, though. I'd catch myself thinking about the little notes she used to leave, or the way she'd surprise me with those weekend trips. I convinced myself we could find our way back to that if we just tried hard enough. Looking back now, I realize I was the only one trying. The day everything fell apart is burned into my mind like a scar that will never fade. It started out so ordinary. I was at a work conference in another state. One of those boring expos where you sit through endless PowerPoint presentations and smile at clients like it's the highlight of your life. On the third day, a crisis hit our office back home, something about servers crashing and losing client data. Typical corporate chaos. My boss called me and the team back early, so I booked the first flight home. On the way back, I had this romantic idea. I wanted to surprise Carolyn. It had been a rough couple of months, and I thought maybe I could spark something again, remind us of how things used to be. I stopped at this fancy flower shop near the airport and bought her favorite purple orchids. The kind she always said reminded her of our first date. I even picked up wine and her favorite chocolates. It felt like a fresh start, something we desperately needed. I got home around 2 p.m. feeling like the best husband in the world. Her car was in the driveway, which made sense since she worked from home on Thursdays. When I walked in, everything seemed normal except for the music playing upstairs. Her favorite playlist, the one she put on when she was in a great mood. That gave me hope. Maybe she'd be happy to see me. But then I noticed 2 glasses in the sink. That was odd. I told myself she must have had a friend over for lunch. Still, something didn't sit right. My heart started racing as I climbed the stairs. The music got louder, and then I heard other sounds. Sounds that stopped me dead in my tracks. My brain refused to process what was happening. I opened the door, and there they were. Carolyn and some guy in our bed. The same bed where we talked about having kids one day. The same bed where I had held her when her father died. They didn't even stop. It was like I wasn't even there. The flowers slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I just stood there, frozen, as the guy scrambled to grab his clothes. He had the audacity to try to brush past me like I was some random inconvenience. Without thinking, I grabbed him by the collar and punched him twice. Hard. I wasn't trying to kill him, but I wanted him to feel a fraction of what I was feeling. He left, and it was just me and Carolyn. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She barely looked at me. Instead, she had the nerve to say, "Why are you back so early?" Like I was the one ruining her day. I stood there shaking, staring at a stranger wearing my wife's face. The woman I'd loved for years, who I thought I knew better than anyone, had just destroyed everything we'd built together. And the worst part, she acted like it was no big deal. After Carolyn's betrayal, my life was a blur. Days and nights bled together as I went through the motions, numb and exhausted. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. The divorce process was dragging on, and every call from my lawyer felt like pouring salt on a fresh wound. Carolyn was making things as difficult as possible, refusing to sign papers, dodging meetings, and making ridiculous demands. Meanwhile, every corner of my house felt haunted by memories of her, and every attempt to distract myself fell flat. One Saturday, I couldn't stand sitting at home anymore. I needed to get out, even if just for an hour. So I decided to visit this small indie bookstore downtown. It was one of those cozy places with creaky wooden floors, stacks of books everywhere, and a faint smell of coffee in the air. I used to love reading before my life turned upside down, but I hadn't touched a book in months. Months. I wandered through the aisles aimlessly until I found myself in the science fiction section. I stood there, overwhelmed. The shelves were full of titles I didn't recognize. Thick novels with strange names and series that seemed to go on forever. I must have looked completely lost because, out of nowhere, a soft laugh broke the silence. I turned and saw her. Emma. She was holding this massive book that looked like it weighed as much as a small dog. She smiled and asked, "Need help picking something?" Her voice was warm, almost teasing, but not in a mean way. I admitted that I had no idea where to start, and before I knew it, we were sitting in these old, worn-out chairs in the corner of the store. She was so passionate about books, her eyes lighting up as she talked about her favorite authors and stories. She had this habit of tucking her hair behind her ear whenever she got excited, which happened a lot. What was supposed to be a quick book recommendation turned into a 2-hour conversation. We talked about everything. Books, movies, weird hobbies, even the worst jobs we'd ever had. It felt natural, easy, like I'd known her forever. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Carolyn or the mess my life had become. I was just present. As we got up to leave, I hesitated but finally asked for her number. My hands were shaking as I typed it into my phone, feeling like a nervous teenager. I walked out of that bookstore with more than just a book recommendation. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had hope. Emma and I had just spent a perfect Saturday together. We'd gone to this little cafe she loved, browsed through a few shops, and were heading back to her car in the mall parking lot. The sun was setting, casting everything in this soft orange glow, and we were laughing about some bad movie reviews we'd read earlier. For the first time in forever, I felt like things were finally looking up. Then I heard it. The sound of an engine revving louder than it should have been. I turned toward the noise just as a car came speeding into the lot. It was heading straight for us. At first, I thought it was just someone being reckless. But then it became clear they weren't slowing down. My instincts kicked in. I grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her out of the way as fast as I could. But I wasn't fast enough. The car clipped her leg. And the sound... God, the sound of her bone breaking will stay with me forever. She screamed, and I watched her collapse onto the pavement. I dropped to my knees next to her, trying to shield her with my body. Everything was chaos. People started yelling, car alarms were going off, and my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. I pulled out my phone to call 911. But before I could finish dialing, I heard the engine rev again. The car wasn't done. It slammed into another parked vehicle, reversing and screeching toward us like a predator circling its prey. I grabbed Emma, ignoring her cries of pain, and dragged her between two parked cars, hoping to put some barrier between us and the driver. She was sobbing, clutching her leg, and I was terrified we wouldn't make it. The car hit one of the parked vehicles near us so hard that the alarms went off. People were running toward us, filming, screaming, but it didn't feel real. And then the driver's door opened. Carolyn stepped out like she was walking into a boardroom, calm and composed, except for the wild look in her eyes. She was wearing the same coat she always used to wear to work. Her hair perfectly done, like she'd planned this whole thing down to the last detail. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My ex-wife had just tried to kill us, and now she was walking toward us, heels clicking on the pavement like it was some twisted countdown. I held Emma close, afraid Carolyn had a weapon or was coming to finish the job. Before she could reach us, a guy, huge like a linebacker, stepped in and restrained her. She fought him like a wild animal, screaming and thrashing, but he held her back until the police arrived. When the cops finally showed up, they arrested her right there in the parking lot. She was still shouting as they put her in the back of the squad car, her voice dripping with venom. Not even a year and you're already parading her around. I looked down at Emma, still trembling in my arms, and realized how close we'd come to losing everything. Carolyn had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. She wasn't just angry or bitter, she was dangerous. And she didn't just try to hurt me. She went after the one person who had made me feel alive again. Seeing Carolyn being dragged away in handcuffs should have felt like closure. But it was hard to feel anything except exhaustion. I sat in the ambulance next to Emma, holding her hand while she gritted her teeth through the pain. Her leg was broken badly, and the paramedics kept telling her to stay calm, but she was more worried about me. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "I'm sorry you're going through this." Imagine that. She just got hit by a car and she's apologizing to me. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Emma needed surgery and they put her leg in this massive cast. She was looking at months of recovery and physical therapy. Watching her struggle to adjust was brutal, but she never complained. She just kept that same quiet determination that drew me to her in the first place. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the fallout from Carolyn's attack. The prosecutors called it one of the clearest cases of attempted murder they'd ever seen. They had everything: witnesses, camera footage, even Carolyn's ridiculous calmness after the fact. Those videos showed her circling the parking lot, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and then speeding straight at us. The craziest part? She actually touched up her lipstick in the rearview mirror before stepping out of the car. The trial felt surreal. I had to sit there and relive every moment of the attack, listening to witnesses describe how close we came to being killed. Emma took the stand, her leg still in a cast, and told the jury what it felt like to see that car coming. She was calm, composed, and honest in a way that made me want to cry and cheer for her at the same time. Carolyn, on the other hand, put on the performance of a lifetime. She cried, apologized, and claimed she wasn't herself that day. The judge wasn't buying it. But even after everything, Carolyn only got 12 years. She could be out in less than a decade if she behaved. That part still burns me. Once the trial was over, the divorce process wrapped up quickly. Carolyn's lawyer didn't have much ground to stand on after the attempted murder charge. The judge didn't even entertain her demands for spousal support. She walked away with nothing except the clothes she came with and a criminal record. As for me and Emma, we moved out of my old place. There were too many ghosts in that house. We found a new apartment closer to the city with big windows and a view that feels like a fresh start. Watching Emma heal has been inspiring. She jokes about the whole thing now, saying getting run over was worth it to get Carolyn out of my life for good. Her dark humor is one of the things I love most about her. We've talked about the future, marriage, maybe even